Well, hello, welcome to another edition of Take 5. This is a second attempt to get this one up. Tried last night, had issues with YouTube. Hopefully it'll work this time. Had a good lesson too and couldn't get it up. So we're in John 9 verse 18. Going to jump right in. If you're not sure what we're talking about, watch the last Take 5. The Jews did not believe that he had been blind and had received his sight until they called the parents of the man who had received his sight and asked them, "Is this your son, who you say was born blind? How then does he now see?" His parents answered, "We know that this is our son, and that he was born blind. But how he now sees we do not know, nor do we know who opened his eyes. Ask him, he is of age, he will speak for himself." His parents said these things because they feared the Jews, for the Jews had already agreed that if anyone should confess Jesus to be Christ, he was to be put out of the synagogue. Therefore his parents said, "He is of age, ask him." Alright, so these guys, the religious prideful leaders, have done all they can the first time with the blind guy, and he stood right up to him. And I'm proud of this guy. And when you're dealing with religious prideful leaders, you need to stand up for them and tell them what you believe, and don't make excuses. Now, his parents, they didn't do that. Alright? They admitted this was their son. They admitted he was born blind. But then they copped out. They didn't want to admit that Jesus did anything for them because they were afraid. They were afraid they'd be put out of the synagogue, which back then was a big deal. It was a really big deal. Your social life was tied up in the synagogue. A lot of your financial life was tied up there. The people you did business with were all part of the synagogue. So it would have had tremendous ramifications for them to be put out of the synagogue, and rather than risk that, they just sort of passed the buck and said, "Okay, you go talk to him again." Alright, we don't need to be that way. We need to stand up for Jesus regardless of what the circumstances are, and that's tough. And we need to be able to withstand whatever the religious prideful leaders try to do to us. Verse 24 says, "For the second time they called the man who had been blind and said to him, 'Give glory to God. We know that this man is a sinner.'" Okay, now, religious prideful leaders sometimes are going to be persistent. Okay? You stand your ground, they're still going to be on the attack. Verse 25, he answered, "Whether he is a sinner, I do not know. One thing I do know, that though I was blind, now I see." They're trying to say Jesus was a sinner. He said, "Look, I don't know about that. I know I was blind, but now I see." The greatest song ever written, "Amazing Grace." I once was lost, but now I found. Now I'm found. Was blind, but now I see. Alright. Verse 26, they said to him, "What did he do to you? How did he open your eyes?" Verse 27, he answered them, "I have told you already, and you would not listen. Why do you want to hear it again? Do you also want to become his disciples?" Just kind of putting it back on him, isn't he? Oh, look, we already went over this, guys. What do you keep questioning me for? You know, I think he's trying to get them to leave him alone. But they won't do it. Verse 28, and they reviled him, saying, "You are his disciple." See, now he wasn't really a disciple of Jesus, but they think they're insulting him by accusing him. "You are his disciple, but we are disciples of Moses." They're doing some name dropping here, trying to say they're better. And this is what religious prideful leaders do. They try to say they're better than you somehow, because your relationship with God isn't as good as theirs. That's really what they're saying. You're his disciple. We're disciples of Moses. Oh, we've been around a long time. We know better than you. Look at your life. Look at our lives. We're in better shape. See? Or they'll talk about their position or their heritage. It's religious prideful leaders. Verse 29, "We know that God has spoken to Moses, but as for this man, we do not know where he comes from." The man answered, verse 30, "Why, this is an amazing thing. You do not know where he comes from, and yet he opened my eyes." Alright, we're going to stop right there. But the blind guy, the guy that was blind, is telling the Pharisees, who were really blind, spiritually blind, basically saying they're stupid. But he's saying it in a nice way. Saying, "Look, you can't figure out where this guy comes from?" Alright, we're going to get into the rest of this tomorrow. You've got to come back, though. This is an incredible, like I said, probably one of my top 5 favorite chapters. I don't know. There's a lot of good ones. But come back tomorrow for the next edition of Take 5.